Auburn landing a quarterback is not the most crucial thing for the 2025 class.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We're dapping it up on this Wednesday with Darrell Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend himself. We're going to talk about the tight ends, and it's not about Rivaldo Fairweather when you talk about this position group and the usage. Also, an insane Auburn basketball stat that we'll touch on towards the end of the show. I firmly don't believe it. It's insane. But quarterback, Darrell, and it's got a lot of talk nationally. It's got a lot of talk on this show as well throughout the Auburn media. In my opinion, it's not the most crucial ad for this class. It's up there. But the most crucial ad for this class is offensive line, and this staff is absolutely knocking it out of the park.
Great point. I want to give you a couple of reasons why I totally agree with you. Number one, I'm not saying that quarterback isn't important. It is. Just because it's not the most important doesn't mean it's not important. So we always need to kind of. Number two, I'm very high on Hank Brown and Walker White. I just am. And then in this day and age, let's say you missed on a couple of five-star top-notch quarterbacks. You have the transfer portal to fall back on. And I also firmly believe, even if Auburn doesn't get its number one target in Juju Lewis, that there's some really good quarterbacks that will come to Auburn, guys like KJ Lacey, someone like that you could fall back on. So for all those reasons, I don't think it's the most crucial. And then to your second point, why it's offensive line, we have seen over the years what good lines of scrimmage can do for football teams. And Auburn went lacking. They were in the desert. They were barren for years. And this is how you build your roster. I think it's easier to find a plug-and-play quarterback, I really do, with the portal than it is to build a dominant offensive line. And I feel like that's what Auburn's doing.
Yeah, and they've done such a good job of going to the portal to kind of bridge the gap. And I think they're going to have to go to the portal again. But as far as where Auburn wants to be 2 or 3 years, because this staff has done it the right way, they are doing this to win in the future, not just to win now. And I think they are doing enough to win more now in the process. But this is about 2025, 2026, 2027, and building a culture and building things the right way. And the foundation is being laid, and it's fun. It's fun to see all of these offensive linemen come to Auburn. But we saw this a little bit with other position groups last year, that first full class that Hugh Freeze was able to build at Auburn. And you saw them stock up on the position groups they thought were worth stocking up on. Wide receiver, linebacker. They added a bunch of DBs. They're adding a bunch of DBs this year too, but that was what they felt they needed in the future. And I also don't think last year's recruiting class offered a whole lot of offensive tackles that scream potential SEC future talent. And this class does, and they're going all in on that. But it's been interesting to see how they've kind of chosen to stack these recruiting classes on top of each other, assuming Auburn holds on to all of these guys. But it's been very evident, it's very clear that they need more offensive linemen. So what are they doing? They're going out and getting one of the best offensive line classes in the country.
Yeah, and I think that an underrated point, a point I want to touch on that you made, no one is saying that you don't go get a tackle or a guard in the portal. There's a difference between getting a bridge guy or a stopgap guy or a fill the hole plug guy, one or two. What Auburn had to do 2 years ago was unprecedented. I mean, think of the offensive linemen. They had to recruit 4 or 5 guys just to field a decent offensive line. You never want to get back to the point where you have to get 4 or 5 offensive linemen in the portal. Right? And you don't want to do that. And that's what Auburn had to do. When I say recruiting from the portal, they don't have to do that this year. Exhibit A, they get Percy Lewis as a starter. They get a couple backup guys, Ronan Chambers and stuff like that. But as far as necessity, urge, desperation, they get one guy.
Yep.
Beautiful. That's what you want to do going forward by building it through your high school class, is get a guy here or there to bridge and to fill a hole, but have the rest of your guys be guys that mature and come through together and kind of just evolve.
Right. And that's kind of the success that you get to see long-term. So what we've seen from them recruiting I guess not through the transfer portal. We've seen them go to the Juco ranks and get a Xavier Miller, which they've already gotten a year out of him as a starting right tackle. We all assume he'll be the starting right tackle again this season. We also assume he'll take a step forward. From the high school ranks, they got Connor Liu, who seems way ahead of schedule, especially mentally for a center, which we got half a season-ish out of him last year. We assume we'll get a full season and then one more after that until he's draft eligible. How quick do we see the other guys that they've already gotten from the recruiting ranks? Your favorite Edwins, your DeAndre Carter. I can't wait to see what the next step looks like for those guys since they're already here.
Well, and they did a nice mixture of getting some guys last year, like a Dylan Sendna, he was transferred from Northwestern, but he was almost like a high school recruit.
It really felt like,
it really felt like that. And then, a Jared Muskrat who came from
Jaden Muskrat. Yeah.
And
Seth Wilford too.
Right.
Yep.
Seth Wilford, a Juco guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a hybrid and there's a nice mixture of all that. But as far as the high school guys, it's going to be interesting if anybody does emerge. Is it DeAndre Carter? Does he get some reps? Is it Favor Edwins, like you said? I don't know. It's going to be – but then you've got all these other guys like E.J. Harris and Tyler Johnson that are supposed to be ready to take the next step too, that were high school recruits. And so I don't know. I think for the first time you're seeing a combination of what you want of all strengths. You've got some transfer portal guys that you're going to count on that you got last year and this year. You got some high school studs. Then you got some depth with some high school guys coming and a Juco guy coming. So I don't know. I think it's a really good way to do your 2 or 3 deep is to just do a combination thereof.
So we agree quarterback's not the most crucial position to lock down in this 2025 class. Is it second? Is it third? Where is it if it's not at the top with offensive line?
I have it second. And I know I just made a case a second ago as to why it's not, but I still think that because of the transfer portal and because of that inevitable thing that somebody could leave if they don't win the job, it goes from, I got 3 or 4 guys in the room to, oh my gosh, I've only got 2. It could happen quickly. It could happen really, really quickly. So it's still crucial to get that. And if you can get that guy that's a program changer, then it even just raises the level of crucialness, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say quarterback is third. I would go O-line, then D-line, and then probably quarterback. And some of it depends on who the quarterback is. Like if it's not Juju, I do think it scoots down more because if it is a KJ Lacey, like that's exciting, but I don't think that changes your equation for the 2025 season. I think Juju does just because he's so good. Because of what you said, we feel so confident in Hank Brown or Walker White. I think Hank would win it if that was the scenario. But the other thing with Juju and so many folks that are commenting on these shows saying like Juju's not worth it or whatever. If it was just Juju, that's probably true. But we say it all the time. Perception is reality in recruiting. And also the amount of players that will come to Auburn, be more likely to come to Auburn if Juju Lewis signs off and says, yes, I'm flipping to Auburn. You're getting more than just Juju, right? Like, I don't think it's a crazy thing to say here.
The value of getting a kid like that is he brings other high-level kids. Yeah. So that's the bottom line. And I think full disclosure, if you would have asked me a year ago, if we were having the same show and we were talking about quarterback and you'd have said, Darrell, who do you think the 2025 quarterback for Auburn is going to be after Peyton Thorne graduates? I'd have said Walker White. I fully expected him to win the job, to be the heir apparent. So let's remember that. And if something does happen and Juju Lewis doesn't come to Auburn, I'm still very high on Hank Brown, Walker White, and whoever else they bring in to compete. I still feel like the quarterback is in good hands. But to your point, Juju Lewis takes the position up a notch and then maybe surrounding a talent that can come on. I do like your take on defensive line too. Gave me something to think about because I think I think about the amount of seniors that are leaving after this year, the guys that Auburn brought in from the transfer portal. Now, I do like the class last year with Lindsey and Blockton and those guys, and you build upon that and put another class like that back to back with Autry and some others, then yes, you're cooking with gas, as they would say. But Man, I'd say maybe 2A and 2B then. You might have convinced me the defensive line is just as important as the quarterback position.
Sure. So the tight end usage in 2024, it's important and it's needed. We'll continue using our word crucial. But I'm not specifically talking about Rivaldo Fairweather. We discuss in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Darrell, you know that Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, whether it's for sports-related events, whether it's for comedy shows, whether it's for concerts. You love Game Time. You fully endorse it.
Because I use them. And it's funny, somebody questioned that the other day on me. Said they didn't really believe I did. And what did I do, Zach? I kept receipts.
You provided receipts.
I provided receipts.
Screenshot action.
I showed all the tickets I've bought, the tickets that are still in my queue that I have yet to use. Yes, if I am going to talk to you about something and say I use it, I'm going to use it, or else I couldn't. That's just how I am.
And Game Time's the best. And right now, you can use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So we highly encourage you to check it out. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. When you look at the tight end room right now, Darrell, obviously Rivaldo Fairweather is the headliner. Rivaldo is a potential player that could represent Auburn in Dallas at SEC Media Days next week. I don't think any Auburn fan would dislike that one bit. But you look at it, 5 guys on scholarship, by my count: Luke Deal, Brandon Frazier, Rivaldo Fairweather. Those 3 guys out of eligibility. They're gone after this season.
3 of the 5 are gone. Yep.
Micah Riley and Rico Walker are your other guys. And I love the style of tight end that both Micah Riley and Rico Walker are. Micah's a really solid blocker, but he's smooth. He's good away from the line of scrimmage. He's a decent route runner. Same with Rico Walker in the limited sample size that we've been able to see him. I think those 2 guys, when you talk about Auburn needing to be successful in 2025, Darrell, I think these 2 guys are crucial. I think these 2 guys are absolutely crucial, and you need to go ahead and get them to be part of the passing game. There's been so many questions about the receivers, and there's questions about the tight end room too. Don't get me wrong. But especially early on, if Peyton Thorne doesn't feel super comfortable in this new offense with some of these new receivers, they need to find a way to get Micah Riley and Rico Walker involved, just from a safety standpoint, and also just to keep those guys happy, because Auburn needs those guys on the roster in 2025.
They absolutely need those guys on the rosters. There'll be only 2 returning tight ends, and then you've got G. Am I pronouncing that right? Ryan G, the tight end, and then rumor kind of stoking the fires. Hollis is probably back in the house. So that gives you, again, 4 or 5 tight ends in your tight end room. What I like about this is really simple. Hugh Freeze has he's got a history of utilizing tight ends to stretch the field. We haven't seen that other than Fairweather yet. And we've seen Fairweather kind of outside sometimes. I'm ready to see between the hashes tight ends stretching the field. And Micah Riley and Rico Walker are potentially able to do that. So what I'd like to see is exactly what you're saying. Acclimate them into the offense this year. We know that you're going to throw the ball to Fairweather, but I'd almost rather see Auburn throw the ball to Walker and Riley over Frazier and Deal, just because we know what we have with Deal and Frazier. And Frazier kind of emerged as a little bit of a surprising weapon to me last year with his size.
I actually think Frazier is what makes this a little difficult, because he was so reliable a year ago. I mean, outside of Rivaldo, I think he was probably the second most reliable tight end, which is a little it was surprising to me.
It's just practice, but I'm going to tell you one of the biggest surprises coming out of spring for me when we were watching spring practice is how good Frazier was catching the ball in traffic. He really uses his size and bodies up like a power forward, boxing out. He's really kind of immersed. So, look, what is he, 6'8"? I would love to see him be that kind of weapon inside the 5, inside the 10. But I think he could be a very, very good, devastating blocker down there, along with Luke Deal. If you go double tight ends, if you're in a running set, those would be the 2 guys naturally that you'd bring in if you're inside the 5 with the package where you're, a bunch package to score inside the 5. I'd like to see that. The utilization of the tight end is one of the most intriguing storylines to me coming this year. how all 5 of them are going to be used. And then more importantly, 2025 with who stays and what their role is. And I think you need to start thinking about that right now in this upcoming season.
And with all these receivers that they seemingly want to get involved, do they use less tight ends this year than last year? 2 years from now, I do think they'll use less tight ends. Even if it is Micah Riley and Rico Walker, I just think the emergence of Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson and Malcolm Simmons and Bryce Kane, and we'll see who else they add via the portal up to that point. But this year, I mean, there's an argument of like, I'm not saying you need to get these guys 3 targets a game. I'm just saying you need to make sure that they feel involved because they do not need to leave, or that's going to be what I think is a problem as far as that room needing to be totally reset. You've got to go out and get another Rivaldo Fairweather, and those just aren't readily available in the portal because, I mean, he came from a smaller school. It wasn't like that was a surefire thing. We all hoped it would work out, and it obviously did, but I mean, how many times have we seen exciting athletic tight ends come to Auburn and nothing happens? Like Rivaldo, that was great. That was super, super exciting that was able to happen. So I'm not saying they need to lead Auburn in receiving or targets or anything like that, but 1 or 2 targets a game for those guys just to make sure that you can pitch to that room, hey, you have a place on this roster and in this offense moving forward. I just think that's an underrated part of this.
It is, and it kind of gets you in a really tough situation between a rock and a hard place because what did you tell these dynamic Fab 4 freshman receivers coming in that you're going to get the ball to them? There's only so many footballs that can go around. I think, and then you still got running backs like Cobb and Hunter that catch the ball out of the backfield. So it's a nice problem to have stinking options to throw to. Man, isn't that a nice theory or a nice concept?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it's way better than it has been. It's just the scheme.
But now, and that's
the
key.
Together.
We'll see as the season progresses. On paper, yes, but when it plays out on the field, is there some things that kind of just naturally evolve where Peyton Thorne feels more comfortable throwing to the tight ends than freshman receivers? We don't know. Remains to be seen.
Yep. So I think the tight end usage is important in this offense outside of just Rivaldo Fairweather. There was the college basketball report page on X posted a graphic, and we'll share it here. It's their graphic. I just had to stare at it for a few minutes because I didn't fully believe it. Let's discuss how huge this is in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. We all know how special it is what Bruce Pearl has done at Auburn. Like, we say it over and over and over again, and it's like nobody, of course, is going to argue with the job that he's done. But this is College Basketball Reports graphic at CBK Report on X, on Twitter. And they put out the college basketball, this is the Power Conference standings over the last 200 games. And when you look at the SEC, Auburn is tied for Tennessee for the lead in the SEC in the last 200 games, going 144 and 56. That is 72% win percentage amongst all power conferences in all of college basketball, Darrell. Auburn and Tennessee tied, and then behind them is Kentucky, Alabama, Arkansas, LSU, these programs that are much more historically known for their level of college basketball than what Auburn has done. It's just an incredible, the last 200 conference games, Auburn is the best in the SEC and among the best in all of, the Power Six in college basketball.
This is the perfect example of the old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words. No matter how much we try to verbalize, Zach, how important and how far this program has come and why people need to pump the brakes on certain things with Bruce and what it means to go to Cameron. What this represents is if you break out 200 games and you average 30 games a season, you're talking about this stat kind of starting in 2017-18. Okay.
Sure.
From that era to here, a blue blood like Kentucky with John Calipari is 4 games behind Auburn in that stretch. Amazing. And then you look at some of the other schools like the Kansases and some of, Arizona and some of these other schools that are really known for basketball, college basketball. I mean,
Arizona in the Pac-12 is the same record, 144 and 56.
I mean, Kansas is 10 games. They probably played more games than Auburn. Look at UConn. I mean, UConn, now, of course, they've had a lot more success recently, but you think of somebody who's dominating college basketball right now, and that's UConn. Auburn's got a better winning percentage. Now, Houston, by way of schedule, yeah, I mean, that's they're freaking dynamo.
But they also weren't in the Big 12 for a lot of that either.
Exactly, true. Look at North Carolina. Zach.
Yeah, North Carolina 133-67. I mean, it's just Auburn, as far as them being measured against their peers, these are the last 200 conference games, Auburn's amongst the elite. So when you look at what he's done, you look at what the roster that he's built, this is the best roster he's ever had.
It is. Yep.
You just think about the upside of what this team is. The upside is a national championship team. Like, that's what we're dealing with right now.
It's really, we've talked about how a lot of people came into college basketball and loved Auburn. That's great. When Pearl came along, we had to suffer through a couple of tough years. But it does go to the fact that when you start throwing around phrases and sentences like this is the greatest era of Auburn college of basketball, it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. And that again just signifies that. And it's not like it's going to be dropping off, like you said, with this roster that Bruce Pearl is going to put out there next year. We only have an opportunity, Auburn does, to build upon that winning percentage. Pretty incredible. And when I saw that, it was just totally blew me away, because I was comparing it, like you said, you made a great point, to peers, to other peers in other conferences, blue bloods, people that have this national reputation year in, year out of being a good college basketball pedigree. And Auburn's just like right there. And it's amazing. And it's not a 3-year stretch. It's not a 5-year stretch. It's
200 games.
7 or 8 year stretch. Yeah. Pretty
and so,
special.
Auburn going to Duke this year, I think that's going to be symbolic, honestly. I think there's going to be some symbolism there, especially if Auburn wins, as far as what Bruce Pearl has done, because they played Duke a few years ago. That was in Maui, if I remember correct. Yeah, it was part of the Maui Invitational. And it's like they hung on with them. I think Zion was on that team, and it's like
that was the Final Four team, I think.
Yeah, but they weren't then.
They weren't then. They progressed and got so much better the last month of the season, because in February they were dog water in February. We were all worried if they were going to make the tournament. They were struggling. They went
they got blitzed by Kentucky, and it's like, what do we do? And then they lose again. Right. So it's just it'll be cool to see if they go and win that game. I think that'll be kind of a full circle moment for Bruce Pearl and Auburn basketball.
And I think that no matter how of a tough home court advantage Duke has, and they do, no matter who you are, you go in there, it's tough. I do believe it'll be tough based upon just the environment, but it won't be a situation where Auburn gets intimidated or their eyes are real big. It's just a tough place to play. It'll be interesting to see, who
and Duke has a talented team. I mean,
year in, year out. I mean, they do. I mean, there's never a time where you're going to go into Duke and be like, oh, Duke sucks, but Cameron's good. So, I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Right.
But this has got to be one of the most anticipated basketball games that Auburn's ever played. And that graphic, that stat justifies it and validates it.
Screams why. I love that you brought Arizona up, though. Good for you.
It's funny. The only reason why I did that is because they had the exact same record. I thought, what are the odds of that? Of two teams I've pulled for over the years, identical records, right?
Sure.
I didn't mention the other team from up north, the Northeast. I let that go.
Yeah, Pitt is not done as well as Auburn or Arizona.
Right, that's true.
I think that's fair to say.
I did mention Kansas and North Carolina, though, too, just to be fair.
Sure. Right? Yeah. Don't give it away. Don't give away your love for Arizona, for sure. Darrell, how can people check out everything that you've got going on?
Follow me on my socials on X, DAP6410, Instagram, Darrell Dapp, and then with you Wednesdays and Fridays.
Yeah, be sure to like the video. Please subscribe. Just a reminder, 2 episodes a day, so be sure you're subscribed. And the other ones have been dropping kind of mid-afternoon for your drive home from work in the evening. So be sure to like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.